What's happening, guys? Mr. Rouge again, and this time we're talking about atoms to molecules. So if you think back to a few videos ago, we talked about schnapps: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. And we talked about how in a star you have protons that fuse together to make heavier elements. And then if I get, so two protons from two hydrogens, those fuse together, and they'll make a helium. If another proton happens to get fused in there, we will get three protons, which is a lithium. What we're going to talk about today is how do these different elements, or how do these different types of atoms form the different molecules that are needed for life, okay? We also talked about water. Water is simply H2O, two hydrogens bonded to one oxygen. Okay? But now if you look at these four molecules, and this might be a little bit intimidating, but don't let it intimidate you. This is going to be super easy, and we're going to break this down. Okay? If you look at these four molecules, what do they all have in common? Or a different question might be, out of these four molecules, which element or which type of atom do you think is the most important to that molecule? And if you're thinking carbon, you are correct. Out of all these molecules, carbon is the most important, okay, because it forms the backbone or the foundation of that molecule, okay? So let's take a moment and talk about carbon. So, carbon is the backbone for all organic molecules. If something has the word organic, we could talk about in class what organic means that you see in the grocery store. But in science, an organic molecule is something that has carbon as its backbone. Okay, it's the most important element to life, and it can form up to 4 bonds in many different directions and shapes. So carbon can form chains like this. It can form branches like this shape, or it can form rings. Okay, so carbon is very, very versatile, and because of that, carbon allows a lot of different molecules to be made and exist. Okay, so carbon is the backbone for all life, and please take note of this slide. And now let's take a look at the other organic molecules that are needed for life. So this one right here is a carbohydrate, and if we break that word down, carbohydrate. Carbo is referring to the fact that it, number one, has carbon in it. And now hydrate, what does hydrate kind of sound like? And if you thought hydrate sounds like water or to hydrate, you are correct. So why do we have this, this part of the word, carbohydrate? Well, if we take a look at water, which is H2O, there's 2 hydrogens for every oxygen. Okay, and remember, the molecule looks like this. Looks like Mickey Mouse ears. That's the oxygen. Those are the 2 hydrogens, right? Okay. So water has a ratio of 2 to 1. 2 hydrogens for every oxygen. When we take a look at this carbohydrate, if we count them up, let's count the carbons. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's count the hydrogens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Let's count the oxygens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If we were to reduce this down, this ratio, this has a ratio of 1 to 2 to 1. Now the ratio of hydrogens to oxygen are the same as in water, but it does have carbon in it. So we call this molecule a carbohydrate. Carbo because it has carbon in it, and hydrate because the ratio of hydrogens to oxygen is the same as in water. It's a 2 to 1 ratio, okay? Let's talk about the next molecule. The next molecule is a fatty acid. And if you take a look at this, this is formed in a chain. Okay? If I were to ask you what elements are present in a fatty acid, you would say that it's carbon, Okay, so we have our chain of carbons, we have our hydrogens, and we also have oxygen. However, when I compare the amount of oxygen to that in a carbohydrate, a fatty acid has very, very little oxygen, okay? So that's a key point. Very little oxygen, okay? There's only two molecules or two atoms in this molecule, okay? Now let's go to the next one. An amino acid. We have one new atom that should stand out, and that's nitrogen. Okay, so we have our backbone of carbon. It's branching out, and it's forming these other groups. Okay, and if we were to look at what's present in an amino acid, we would say that it has carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen. Now, what about this box, this R? What's the deal with this? We haven't talked about that before. So this is a generic amino acid. There's actually 20 different types of amino acids. There's 20. You don't need to know them, but I'm just going to tell you why they're different. Every single amino acid is completely the same except for this box right here. We call this the R group. The R group changes between each amino acid, and that's what makes it different. So if we take a look at this picture right here, all of these structures are the same. All these amino acids are the same. They're all identical except for this bottom R group, okay? And that's what makes each 20 amino acid different from each other. Now, in amino acids, we have, I'm going to reword it differently so you guys can remember. Instead of shna, I'm going to say chan. It's easier for you to remember. We have carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen, but if we look at all 20 of these amino acids, let's see if I could find one real quick. We will see that some of them have sulfur present. So, for example, this one right here, methionine, in the R group, there is a sulfur present. Okay, and cysteine, there's a sulfur present. So, for the amino acids, I would say there's carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sometimes sulfur. Because some amino acids have sulfur in the R group, and the R group is not the same between all 20. Okay, let's take a look at the last one. The last one is a nucleotide. Okay, go ahead and say that word real quick to yourself, nucleotide. And we can see that in the nucleotide we have carbon forming the ring. We have hydrogen. We have oxygen. We still have nitrogen. And now we have this new one, we have a phosphorus. So, in nucleotides, we have phosphorus present. No sulfur, okay? Okay. I would like for you guys to take the sketch in your notes real quick too. Please include this part. These are the atoms, these are the key players, okay? And a carbohydrate has carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in a 1-to-1 ratio. That's why it has the name carbohydrate. Carbo refers to carbon. Hydrate means that there's a 2-to-1 ratio of hydrogen and oxygen like water. Fatty acids have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but with very little oxygen. Amino acids have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sometimes sulfur, depending upon the R group. Okay, this is the abbreviation for amino acids. Nucleic acids have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. And again, this is a big important one. Organic molecule means that it contains carbon. All right, so let me give you a little disclaimer. This whole video, I only went over what the molecules are and what their structure is. Later on in class, we're going to go over why these molecules are important and what they do for us. But right now, this is all the information that I want you guys to know, and we'll go a little more in depth the next video. I'll catch you guys later. Peace.